Hello, thank you for joining us once again. Last week we concluded the 5th key driver of enterprise competitiveness. And this week, we start on the 6th key driver of enterprise competitiveness, which is laws and policies that facilitate competitiveness. And in this topic, we start off with the sources of how laws emerge. Number 1, strong trade associations. 2, strong national conscious public service. And lastly, a well-organized political parties. Enjoy!
This is session number 6, which is called Supportive Laws and Policies for Enterprises. I come to you from the lake city of Kivu city of Goma, the province of North Kivu, where we have been since Saturday, June the 3rd, after our first leg of the business trip to Kinshasa. In our work to promote enterprise for young people, we have found ourselves scouting regional markets to find space for both our products and services and capital for Ugandan businesses. Trade is two-way. We strengthen each other when we exchange products of our labor. Our companies cannot compete if we don't innovate or shape the nature of laws and policies that promote trade. Many of you might know I come from a liberal yet Pan-African background, and I therefore go for promotion and less regulation. Regulating businesses is good, yes, if you are protecting markets, but the real deal is to promote what we produce in other markets so that there's more revenues coming into our businesses and into the country. So how do laws emerge, laws and policies? Today I'll speak about quickly 3 sources. First, when you have a strong trade associations in your country that drive volumes of trade, that build in-house standards, say for dairy products, for beef, for sugar, for cement, and many other products, they initiate laws that a state should use to protect them, to protect those businesses. Let me give you an example. When Captain Lugard came to Uganda after his sojourn in Nyasaland is the old name for Malawi, in 1889, he said, and I paraphrase, Britain has no textiles of her own. They all come from India. Britain has no tea of her own, for we don't have the climate to grow the tea. It all comes from China and India. What can we therefore do to grow Her Majesty's government coffers, Her Majesty Queen Victoria at the time? We must take out all raw materials from this area called Uganda, which is copper, cotton, tea, and we must process these at our home base in England. And we must force these new markets, which we are protecting in quotes, that we have found, they must take our wares. Close quote, paraphrase. This policy is what was called at the time mercantilism, or the process of using your force of state to break open markets and dump your wares, and these markets supply you nothing of processed value, but you give them shirts, finished shirts, and you take out their cotton. Cotton, as some of you might know, has 100 different products. So you take those products to Britain and you bring finished, you take the raw material that gives you 100 products and bring finished products. You process it raw at base. Now, when you have strong trade associations, like I mentioned, you could fight Lugard at the time, or you can fight the Lugards of today. In 1985, I was giving an example here in the conference. President Reagan of the US wanted to force Brazil to open its nascent computer industry to US manufacturers who are strong. The frustrated nationalist movement in Brazil at the time was called Técnicos with a COS at the end. They banded together and refused the pressure. They instead grew the computer industry by initiating the industrial policy to support local production of computers until Brazil was strong enough to export our own computers. Brazil today manufactures not just computers, but aircrafts and the very computers that those aircrafts run on. It is because they passed policies as trade associations to protect the industry at the end of the 1980s and the beginning of 1990s. Therefore, you young people listening to me, trade associations can initiate policy even if it is in the selfish national or regional interest of those trade associations. Trades are more reliable in proposing and implementing policy. So the question is, where do you belong, you as a young person in business, in these associations? And how strong is your association in influencing government policy? So that was number one source of policy and laws to protect trade for the country. Number two, when you have a smart, nationally conscious public service that has strong national cadreship in terms of public interest for the country, you will initiate policies that protect businesses. My favorite public sector servants are the Japanese, the Koreans, and the Singaporeans. You know, these three countries I've mentioned, policies in the promotion of heavy chemical industries, vehicle manufacturing, electronics, transport and finance, all these sectors, it is the public sector officials that led the way, not the businesses. The Japanese promotion of electronics as their core proposition to the world at the end of 1970s and beginning of 1980s meant that computing, which they would later lead, chemicals, assembly, and manufacturing, it meant that all these the businesses using this policy scaled, and it made Japan easier to compete with the West in new markets in developing countries. The initiators of this policy were purely public servants. In Japan, actually at the start of the 80s and 70s, they used to say, and I paraphrase, we don't mind who leads us politically. We don't care how intelligent or unintelligent they are. But if you choose to join our public service, you better be careful to do the right thing for Japan. If you don't, you harm all of us Japanese, and we will hang you before you commit suicide. Close paraphrase. So the question is, how good is our public service at initiating and executing policies that promote and protect businesses? I leave that question to you. Source number three, and I close. I think the third and often most ignored source of good policy, because of politics it's ignored, a source of good policy for enterprise is the matter of strong, well-organized political parties. A political party, whether it is in government or opposition, can really be a boon for good businesses if it is nationally conscious. Parties that seek quality leaders among their ranks from bottom up are often the parties with good economic and social research that initiates new horizons for countries' enterprises. So for me, it still strikes me as odd that any failing entity in our country, whether the entity is failing on account of poor management or economic conditions, that entity has nowhere to go for counseling, for retooling, and for relaunching its products and services differently. Businesses failing and we look the other way is often a function of our political and public service institutions, their weaknesses and the disjointed nature they look at entrepreneurship and enterprises. Any business failure is our collective failure because it disincentivizes young people from taking risk. So how do you de-risk businesses entering a new market with good ideas? By having institutions that are sensitive to business, that initiate and sustain debate on enterprise creation and sustenance, that initiates trade policy. Have a good weekend.
Would like to hear from you. Please email us at info@tapmedia.com and visit our website at www.tapmedia.com. You can also visit our offices located at Tomosi Business Park, Luzira, Port Bell Road, or call 0414 220 702. Thank you.